Hey guys, Youthful Yields here. Today we're going to be going over the portfolio for the week. So, as everyone knows, unfortunately, Friday was a very interesting day. The market, so the S&P 500 was down 2.7%, so almost 3%, just due to the Trump tariff tweet, in which he basically said that they are probably going to impose an extra 100% tariff on China. So there's that. So you can see pretty much everything is red here. There's some stuff, otherwise that's green. And one of the biggest winners for me for this week was AMD, up 30% for the week, despite obviously those tariff announcements. Also, I just read something somewhere just a few minutes ago saying that, or I think it was another quote from Trump saying that it might have been a misunderstanding or something. So I don't know, you can call it market manipulation or insider trading or whatnot, but potentially the markets are going to be very green tomorrow. We'll see, of course. Obviously, I can't. I'm not like some. I don't read the crystal ball, but moving into the portfolio for this, we see that the last week we're down 2.4% on SPY. Our portfolio, luckily, is only down 0.59%, with some of that being in between Composer and M1 Finance. You can see that the last week on Composer we lost 1.32%, and the last week on M1 Finance 1.7%. Webull went up as well, which is pretty nice, but overall, relatively the same as per usual. You can see we're only down 79.14%, but we've been here before many, many, many times. You can see that in this chart. It's just a bouncy up and down. So we'll see where that takes us, but obviously, who knows? In terms of this portfolio, I did. Now I mentioned last week that I had a little bit of stuff from my security deposit from my last house that I'm gonna invest. So I did the $100 investment into Composer, and I'll show that in a second. But then I put the rest in Friday. So I put 2,000 into M1 Finance and 2,000 into Composer. And the idea, I really didn't think Monday was going to be that crazy. In fact, I did that because I thought maybe later in the week we would have a nicer rebound, and that still might be the case. So that's the idea that I had, was basically because Friday was such a crazy down day. And because it was tariff related, if it was something else that would have been different, but because it was tariff related and we've seen this before in April, I really thought that the markets were going to jump back, so that's why I decided to do this. So tomorrow, you know what? I think maybe it traded, or maybe it hasn't technically transferred yet. I'm not sure, because usually it does say that the trades would be happening. But I'll change this to a week so you can see we're down 0.69%. And the biggest up on this obviously is the AMD, up 30%, largest thing there. And I'll get into the actual holdings in a second. We see that the utility companies went up as well. And last but not least, the consumer staples a little bit. Biggest one there is Pepsi. In terms of the biggest losers this week, we have industrials, with the largest loser being RTX, Raytheon. We have real estate. The largest loser there is Prologis. And then last but not least, we have technology. Biggest loser there was Apple. So what's really interesting, actually, before I go into that, there wasn't really anything going on, but you can see actually during the afternoon, we did do the 2000, which is really good because it didn't work out on Composer because of their terrible speed. Uh, you know, it's honestly not that bad, but when you put something in M1 Finance, I think they have some weird like intermediary thing where they trust that your funds are going to get there and they give you that credit pretty much immediately. So I was able to put all of these buys in there, and so that's really good. I got basically discounts if the market goes up tomorrow, at least on the M1 Finance portfolio. So that's nice. On the Composer portfolio, we have here crazy movement, from KMLM, the foreign rat. This was down. Basically, these were swapped. You can see the crazy jump here, and this is KMLM. I was really tempted to sell all of these, and actually, because I have a consolidated symphony that has all of these symphonies within one. Technically, I don't like the trading threshold is different, but I thought that I might do that because at some point this was only down about 9%, I believe, and this was up like 10%. And I added them all together, and for that amount, we'd actually be around, we have lost $5, but that's like nearly nothing. But I didn't, just because I mean, I really do want to do it. I don't know. I just waited. Anyways, like I mentioned, I have that incoming $2,000 deposit, but I had these $50 deposits last. I think it was like on Tuesday or Wednesday, or sorry, Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, I guess. Is when it happened. But you can see here that our this one's up a little bit, and then this one's up a little bit down. This one took a big dump. Obviously, this track's close to the S&P 500, relatively speaking. The largest loser, I believe, was QLD/QQQ. Just to give you a frame of reference, QQQ was down about 3.5% last week. On Friday. So there's that. And then we obviously have QLD mixed in there and some other stuff. So really got squashed pretty bad on that, but it could be worse. We were only down 1.54%. So overall, not too bad, but yeah. And then moving into this, the reason I bought $50 worth of each of those was so I could track how well it performs in comparison. Because these are the two that I was thinking about because they both go back to 2007 and whatnot. So you can see here that modified foreign rat has the highest risk score, and so does KMLM. And the risk score is not risk of terms of like volatility, max drawdown. That's probably can be changed, but it's actually in terms of the deviation. So this is the symphony deviation analysis. So if I open up each of these, for example, and then also compare it to, let's say, this one, you can see that the yellow line is the backtest performance and the blue line is the live performance and how much that's deviated, right? So this had a big deviation here and also like here and, so on and so forth. The correlation might be high, right? This is 0.96%. Or, I'm sorry, technically you can think of it as a 96% correlation, right? Very high. Because they generally move in the right direction or the same direction. The problem is tracking error, and more specifically, which I have, that this is how the risk score is being calculated on the back end is the RMSE, the root mean square error, or something like that. Which, in simple terms, basically is just the deviation between the two lines. The higher the RMSE, the higher you are going away from your benchmark. So, and that's kind of how tracking error works, but not exactly the same. So, you can see here though, these have there's not that much data to be completely fair, but this is the one that someone else made that I just thought was like really good and really is on par with mine. But you can see mine is actually lower right now. You can see the tracking error is 0.3. It's literally almost identical. I think it comes down to a literal cent. So yeah, 48.75, 48.74, where this one is 50.16 and that's 50.10. So 6 cents there. But that's like completely nothing. And you can see both of these have the 1.0 correlation. So they definitely move correctly. But my point is, I want these to match their backtest as close as possible because that's the biggest problem that we have on Composer, which is that it uses closing data to make the backtests, but you don't use closed data to actually make those tests. Or what am I trying to say? Composer buys 10 minutes before close, And so there's a very high possibility something like an RSI check could be triggering 10 minutes before close, but on close is not. So the chance of you deviating really comes down to how twitchy the logic is between the last 10 minutes. So very volatile funds like UVXY or really any VIX product is going to cause that, and that's why some of these are so bad in terms of deviation. This one's 5% off. And to give a frame of reference, you can see here the modified format looks at, um, you know, current price of SPY, then it looks at EEM, IWM. So, there's that. And then I'm not going to go into KMLM switcher because it's just too much, but this is my point. So I know there's not a lot of data here, but you can see these 5 here have the same amount of data points. And you can see something like the SPY or bull or hedge, which is going to be that lowest one that we have in terms of the 5, and the tracking area that's equated to that versus, literally almost 10 times more on the modified foreign rat. So, yeah, really interesting. What's also really interesting is you can see that the correlation on this one is actually surprisingly low compared to its tracking area. So you can tell that it's not correlation that you just have to solely care about. It's not tracking that you just solely have to care about. What's interesting, though, is this somehow manages to keep up with it. But you can see this is kind of why it's showing up as a moderate thing. And why these are elevated, right? So these are both a little bit astray compared to these, for example, or even just this SPY one, because it's pretty close, right? So you can see the ending one is 102.34, 101.85. And I do expect that these are, it's almost guaranteed that these are going to be slightly different from each other. That's just how it works. It could be super close. Like, you could make the argument that the 10-day RSI could change literally within a cent, right? So a 1 cent change. So we're just trying to find stuff that really is not that twitchy. And that's kind of the whole point of this. So overall, though, I'm pretty not, so the plan of my money, I think I'm literally going to just put 1,000 in each of these for the meantime and hope for the best, because that's about how much we have in this. So we'll just have that kind of flowing out and see how those perform over time. And eventually we'll come down to one symphony and determine how much variance we're getting from that. So what we could also do to get a because I mentioned we technically could have put it in one symphony. What we can do is take the average of the risk scores of these, so 8 plus 9 plus 29 plus 52 plus 73, and divide it by 5. So we could do that real quick. So we can do like 73 plus 52 plus 27, 9, and 8, and divide that by, now that was not right, 73 plus 52 plus 27 plus 9 plus 8, and divide that by 5. So the average risk score is 33, which is a little bit higher than this HT short. So in general, it's going to be about a 33.8% risk score. That's not entirely true, though, because, again, I touched base on this a little bit earlier, but the thresholds are different. So something like the HG Live 2-month combo V2, whatever, that has a monthly trade setting where these are 10% and then these are daily. So, yeah, I don't know. But that's just food for thought. Overall, I'm pretty excited to go in the next week, obviously, because of the red week. And on the Composer portfolio, there's like a pretty community, or there's a community Discord, and my 1.5% is very little compared to a lot of people ran, because a lot of people are just running very bold strategies and they're not really accounting for such events like this. And it's hard to account for events like this, right? Because this just comes out of the blue. You could argue that potentially technical indicators aren't going to be able to um, actually determine this, or not determine this, but predict this, and that could be true. But ultimately, it still comes down to having a proper hedge, pretty much at all times. So, anyhow, guys, that is gonna be it for me today. Yeah, and as always, I wish you guys a wealthy future.